rip!
In 2005, Australia's best young Aboriginal footballers were brought together for a unique talent program to find the AFL stars of the future.
It's an exciting day for all of us, really, when you see him for the first time and you see someone that you think really could end up a household name in the football world within 3 to 4 years.
In AFL, that 10% of all AFL players are Indigenous, yet Indigenous people only make up 2% of the Australian population, and people talk about their fantastic skills, and clearly for many young Indigenous boys it's a way of achieving something in life that for them is fantastic, and it gives them self-respect and national fame and considerable wealth. And so I thought, the idea of following a group of boys over a number of years, doing a longitudinal doc, following a group of boys trying to get up into the AFL was a really interesting idea, and hopefully ultimately an optimistic one. And I guess in very broad terms, to me it's the great festering sore in Australian society, just the whole Indigenous issue and the fact that their standard of living, well, for some of them, is so poor compared to the rest of the Australian population. So for me, those issues are really important and should be investigated. So for a long time I kind of fished around and got to know how the whole recruiting, talent scouting system worked for AFL players. The great challenge was to try and find a group of boys that might intersect at some point. So rather than having 3 completely disparate stories about 3 different boys, ideally I wanted to find a way of either starting their story together with them together, and perhaps there might be points on the way where those characters would intersect. But there was a inaugural Kickstart camp, it was called, that the AFL was involved in, and 40 or 50 Indigenous kids from around Australia, all around 14, 15 years old, were brought to Melbourne for a week on a talent program. So out of that group of 40, 50 kids, I kind of chose, there were probably 6 or 7 that I was kind of interested in initially. And of that 6 and 7, there were 3 that I ended up following in the final film. So at one point it was going to be 4 boys dreaming, 5 boys, 2. As a filmmaker, I never felt that I put any sort of great expectations on them. It was more just about telling their story, and if AFL wasn't their passion anymore, and if they weren't on track to become AFL stars, I certainly didn't want to create any sense of guilt or pressure that might be the case. I thought it was important to maintain a sense of intimacy that that I kind of engage with the kids most of the time. But they're 3 kids, well, and I was following more than 3 kids initially, so I'm following a bunch of kids right across the country. So the mechanics of actually maintaining a relationship with them, trying to be there when things happen, realising that there are lots of things happening that you aren't able to cover and you end up having to cover in retrospect. I found out all that really sort of difficult, and there's a lot of stress in you're putting all your eggs in a limited number of baskets, and you're not quite sure how people are going to go. And I certainly wanted at least one of the boys to be up there in the AFL. It is a sporting film on one level, and on another level a film about Indigenous, 3 Indigenous boys. But I also think it's a lot more than that. To me it's a lot of really complex issues that it brings up about parenting, about people's standard of living, about education. So I kind of went through all those things, but in the end I was, I guess, lucky to find or settle on 3 kids who were quite articulate and certainly very honest and open, but who also had really engaging stories.
We went down to the airport and Jimmy walked off the plane. Everybody just went, instantly apparent that the person that went down to Antarctica was not the person that got off that plane.
When governments are involved and Antarctica is involved, it's a secluded place, so I'm sure stuff can be going on there.
I suppose we've all got our family stories, and I grew up with a particularly dark fairy tale that was our family story. And I suppose it's something that's haunted me for, most of my life. Yeah, I think it was probably the most frightening story that I could tackle, and it was that my father, when I was 7 years old, he was a climber from Scotland, went to Antarctica to train the American military and the scientists down there survival techniques. And his story is that he found secret nuclear testing that the government were doing, and that the CIA lobotomised him, medevaced him out of there, and then as a consequence he was never the same again. He was fractured and paranoid. And so our family lost contact with him. So it's a story about me finding out if there's any truth to that, conspiracy story. I found a number of theories. And I think the film, first of all starts out as a detective story where I'm on, kind of quite a dogged trail to find out exactly what the truth is. And then halfway through, it probably flips a little bit. It turns into more of a family story, and I sort of find out that the answers are probably a little bit closer to home. I didn't actually want to be in the film. I think I was in total denial initially that I had to be in the film. I was really resisting it. I thought I could do quite an investigative, detached, cool kind of treatment of it, but it became really clear that I had to be in it. And then I was really mindful that I didn't really want it to be a therapy film. So it could have been a lot worse than it was. There's loads of me crying off camera. What I found out was, a number of truths, and that it's such a subjective thing, and that, it was really clear to me that people tell themselves the stories that they need to survive. And so, a number of different people in the film have different versions of what happened to my father, and I think they're the ones that they need, to tell themselves to get through the day. I think we probably got about 100 hours all up. Probably took about a year because I had to travel quite a lot. I had to go to Scotland, not Antarctica, didn't have a budget, wanted to go. America, New Zealand, and it was just a small crew. It was me and the producer Rachel, especially with my dad. A lot of the time actually it was just me with a camera in there with him in his small bed sit. And it was just an intimate, no frills enterprise really. There's something about having your own children, and especially my eldest daughter Luca was the same age as I was when Jimmy went mad. And so I think it brought up a lot of stuff about mortality and, your own family and, your sort of connections to that. It seemed really clear that if you told it chronologically as I made the discoveries along the way, then at least it would have a spine. So we pretty much followed that rule. At one point we thought we'd do it really fractured and trippy like his mind, but that just would have been like an acid movie. Nobody would have understood it. I suppose I was really mindful that the camera didn't have to be on all the time, and that I actually needed it as an excuse to have anything to do with him. I was so fearful of meeting him again. I don't think I ever would have if I hadn't, had the technology and an excuse to knock on his door. So, there's something about like the mental illness of a family member that is quite paralysing. And you're in so much denial that that's actually what's happening that you can really not sort of do them much good at all. As a director, you really want to get, you want to get drama, and you want to get struggle and conflict, and you want people really, and you want that on film. But as a daughter, you really don't want to be doing that to your own family. So yeah, I struggled ethically with where I was coming from. I thought, am I just some over-ambitious, cold bitch from hell, But then I suppose because it is about mental illness, you kind of go, well, there might be a greater good, hopefully, if people can start discussing it and getting it out there.